And I ask unanimous consent that the Senate agree to the motion to proceed to H.J. Res. 59, that no debate, amendments, or motion to the resolution be in order, that any and all points of order be waived, that the resolution be read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table without any intervening action or debate.
Mr.
Is there objection?
Yes, I'm in a position now to object, and I must do that.
Objection is heard. Senator from Texas.
No American wants a government shutdown. I don't want a government shutdown. No one on this side of the aisle wants a government shutdown. The House of Representatives doesn't want a government shutdown. Mr. President, 5 minutes ago, the Senate could have acted to prevent a government shutdown. The request that I promulgated to the majority leader was to pass the continuing resolution that the House of Representatives passed, and if that had happened, there would be no government shutdown. A government shutdown would be taken off the table. The specter that you and I see on the television screen every day, the countdown clock that has started to appear, would disappear. But unfortunately, the majority leader chose to object. To object and to say no. He would rather risk a government shutdown than act to prevent it. Now, why? Again, the majority leader was quite candid. Because he supports the law called Obamacare. And I would note a component of that also. One of the pieces that the House of Representatives passed was a law that has been called the Default Prevention Act. The President of the United States has been doing a fair amount of public speaking, raising the prospect of a default on our debt. And the House of Representatives acted boldly to include in their continuing resolution language that would say the United States will never, ever, ever default on its debt. That in the event the debt ceiling is not raised, we will always pay our debt first. Now, I suspect every member of this body has spoken publicly about the calamity that would come from a default on the debt. I think it is quite revealing that the majority leader explicitly referenced and objected to by name taking a default off the table. I think that's unfortunate. There is a tendency in this town towards brinksmanship, towards pointing to events that can cause instability and uncertainty and using them to try to get your way. I wish the majority leader had been willing to step forward and say, I agree, number one, that the government should be funded. We should not have a government shutdown. And number two, that we should never, ever, ever even discuss a default on the debt. Had the majority leader simply said, I consent, a default on the debt would have been taken permanently off the table. Now, why didn't he? We all know why he did not. Because the majority leader embraces Obamacare. I'm going to suggest to you, Mr. President, that this body, a little over 3 years ago, passed Obamacare. It passed it on a straight party line vote. And in the time since it's passed, America has learned that it's not working. Americans all over this country are suffering because of Obamacare. It is the single biggest job killer in America. Every day we're seeing more and more evidence that Obamacare is killing jobs, that it is hurting American workers who are struggling, that it is causing people to be forcibly put into part-time work 29 hours a week, that it is jacking up their health insurance premiums, and it's causing more and more people who are struggling to lose their health insurance altogether. Just today, the New York Times reported that because of Obamacare, quote, insurers are significantly limiting the choices of doctors and hospitals available to consumers. That's today in the newspaper. USA Today reported on a new, quote, family glitch that could cause up to 500,000 children to go without insurance coverage. A headline in the Washington Post today read, quote, 1 week away, Obamacare's small business insurance exchanges not all ready for launch. And even the labor unions that once championed Obamacare are now publicly decrying it as a threat to the 40-hour work week that is the backbone of the American middle class. That is in the words of organized labor. This law is hurting the American people, and it's why there is bipartisan consensus outside of Washington, D.C., that we need to step up and stop it. That would be the responsible thing for senators on both sides of the aisle to do, to say the same rules should apply to hardworking American families that apply to big corporations and that apply to members of Congress. We've seen the president unilaterally put in place exceptions for giant corporations and members of Congress. Mr. President, I would submit hardworking American families deserve that same exception. So I think it is unfortunate that the majority leader chose to object to continuing government, to preventing a shutdown, to taking a default off the table. But I do think it is clarified to make clear, as the majority leader just did, that he is willing to risk a government shutdown. He is willing to force even a government shutdown in order to insist that Obamacare is funded.